Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I'm Yoshinari Nishio from Japan. I'm going to introduce about my past works today. I am calling my artistic practice fashionscape design, meaning designing an unexpected situation that clothes are worn or utilized through my works and workshops. Dressing up is an act that is shared by the entire human race, but the way in which we wear clothes is largely regulated by the culture and times in which we are born and raised. People grow up, learn certain defined way of wearing clothes to a point where they even used to question those customs at all. In today's contemporary globalizing society, new clothes are manufactured each season and continually presented to us, inviting us to participate in the next act of consumption. I feel a strong discomfort in this situation. My experiment through various practices is to diversify and broaden the options that people interact with clothes, including obtaining, wearing, changing, washing, and disposing of clothing. My early work, Familiar Uniform, is about the relationship between fashion and communication. For this work, I recreated exactly the same scene of family photographs that was taken 20 years ago, using the same locations, people, and clothing. So this photo was taken when I was 3 years old, so the smallest one is me. Then I recreated the photo after 20 years, like this. Then all clothes didn't remain. Then, of course, children grew up, so I recreated all of these clothes. Actually, it was not so easy to negotiate with my elder brother, but what made this work possible is the family ties maintained over 20 years. So clothes that family members are wearing in respective picture show the time that the family have spent together. Then I expanded my interest to the clothes and human relationship to my next project, Self-Select. For this project, I tried to exchange clothes with strangers. So I mean, outfit he wears is originally my clothes. Then outfit I wear is originally his clothes. So this photo was taken in Paris, 2007. I approached passers-by using local language in different cities where I traveled. This was taken in Nairobi, 2009. I don't choose people to negotiate by their appearances, gender, or ages. Since my local language skill was very poor, so I had to communicate in very limited vocabularies like, excuse me, I'm poor at communicating using your language, so would you mind exchange clothes with mine so so that we communicate more deeply. This was taken in Cotonou, Republic of Benin, 2012. So luckily, some of people were happy to exchange the clothes and agreed to take photographs. But of course, to be refused is one of the important aspect of this project. So I can also say this is a research project to know how people react. So for example, someone in Paris refused me, saying things like, you can take a picture of me as I am, but I want to wear your clothes. Or someone said, I'm interested in doing, but I'm not wearing makeup today. Or someone who are Muslim said, this is religious clothes, so let's do that after I change clothes to my everyday wear. So yeah, all reactions are very interesting to me. This was taken in Auckland, New Zealand, 2015. So I have done in 4 cities with 117 people in total until now. Then this is a lifelong project that will continue. So it's a kind of my self-portrait. When we exchange clothes, I use mobile fitting rooms like this on the street. So yeah, this can be a public performance and attract people around there who are not interested in art. Then next, People's House is conceived from my research about clothing size. For this project, I transformed the clothes that were originally manufactured for single person's use into the big clothes for accommodate multiple people. In this project, I collect unwanted clothes in various sites, then patchworked them together with local people and recreate a monument inspired by the local area. This time, steam locomotive was recreated in Nairobi. In Nairobi, the general people have very little contact with arts, so participants expressed their enjoyment, saying things like, "I'm not sure what's going on, but I'm joining in because it's simply fun. And it's my pleasure to learn about what you guys are doing through participation." The participants in Nairobi had some amount of extra time and a high sense of curiosity, and these traits went hand in hand with this project. So eventually, the patchwork turned into a huge canopy, and the exhibition site became a meeting place for everyone. So I mean, this situation is closed for accommodate multiple people. This is installation view from Roppongi Art Festival 2014. I collected 3,000 pieces of clothes and worked for 3 months with local people for this project. It is interesting for me that participants become like a huge family by spending extraordinary days to make patchworks. Even after finishing the project, we are tied to each other. Actually, it is often happening that people who participated in past my project join next project, which is held another place. Then the family grows bigger and bigger. In this project, People's House project, when the installation ends, the patchwork is taken apart because it's just a fabric, and back close to individual's owner. This is the Ueno Great Buddha reconstructed through patchwork. I will explain a bit about the process of this project. This is the current Great Buddha. Due to the delivery of metals to make weapons during the Second World War, only the face remains. Next to that, there is an open space set aside for the planned reconstruction of the Great Buddha, which is unlikely to be realized. I used this vacant space as a base for my project. Other than sewing machines, all of the materials I used for the project already existed on site. Next to the vacant lot were a storage room and a management shed which contained almost all of the items I needed for production, including chairs, tables, electric outlets. Then worshippers and workers from the management shed began to help with the project. The work involves cutting second-hand garments collected from the local people into squares and then sewing them together. This simple nature of the work opens up the potential for additional participants. A manager introduced me to his carpenter friends who are working for this temple. The carpenter taught me some knowledge from his experiences, which helped me to draw up the plan for bringing up the patchwork. Following personal connection within this location led to more participants. Once the pipe scaffolding went up, people became curious and the number of visitors increased. Attracted by the keyword patchwork, people skilled in sewing and students specializing in the field joined in to enjoy their own design. As the patchwork gradually continued, the previously empty space started to become more colorful. This parent and her daughter came regularly to this spot to collect some kind of nuts. With previous experience in sewing work, they proactively joined the project and ended up becoming a central presence of the project. Then sometimes they also provided homemade meals. A foreign researcher who happened to pass by and tourists from far away also joined in this project. Patterns were placed upon the blue top brought by the carpenter, and the patchwork was divided and cut to fit the shape of the Great Buddha. Then 250 ropes were fastened to the scaffolding. The carpenter and his friends took initiative in volunteering to lead this duty. So they climbed above while I gave instructions from the ground. So this process of lifting up the patchwork took 7 hours. So this is the finished work of the Ueno Great Buddha. Then a celebration was held for the project's completion. This event was planned with the manager's invitation of a soprano singer, who is also a fellow worshipper. An organ was borrowed from a nearby facility and brought to the site. Then many people gathered below the Ueno Great Buddha, drawn by the voice of the singer. But the exhibition was held in October, meaning it was typhoon season in Japan. So a blue-top roof was constructed according to the carpenter's opinions. However, this blue-top roof ended up causing damage to the Buddha's head. Heavy rain caused water to collect in one part of the roof, which applied pressure to the head. Then repairing it required all of the ropes to be removed. Then the carpenter manager and the other participants naturally decided to aim for a second exhibition after repairs. The same members from before successfully repeated the 7-hour task of bringing up the Great Buddha. Actually, the face of Buddha had changed from previous one, like plastic surgery. But what I learned from this was the fabric can be repaired and reworked any number of times if you take time for it. Then some expressed the opinion that the head was damaged because it wasn't backed by the prayer of the chief priest. So the chief priest willingly prayed for the great Buddha. So this picture, which I also pointed out in the beginning, shows that moment of prayer. The main material in this project is people's unwanted clothes. As you know, many people have clothes they don't need anymore in their closet in this generation. So what if, for example, we used all of those clothes to make the great Buddha, and after exhibiting it, we can make clothes for use by individuals. Or we could burn them as a service to the dead, because temples and shrines usually do a service to burn all the things to purify and send them to the heaven. So I think it could become a new festival for a community if we held this project regularly in this place. Pavlov, like People's House, was a project to create a space with clothes and share individual belongings with the others. This project was conceived and exhibited in Aichi Triennale 2016, highlighting social design aspect. For this project, I asked local people to donate their important clothes to create a public wardrobe anyone can use. So title of Pavlov means public wardrobe. Written on tags attached to the clothes on display are stories about each clothing item. The museum visitors could freely try on clothes and borrow them like borrowing a book from a library for 2 weeks. These are changing rooms. The aim of this project was to offer the fresh lens to think how clothes define our identity. So in this regard, this project shares the same interest with Self-Select project, which I already introduced. I also put a sewing machines in the gallery for those who would like to adjust the size or alter clothes. Using clothes as a medium, I create an unexpected situation and a unique space for communication. We also held a workshop for children here. Then this is Pavlov User's Guide. As a caption, the following things are possible in Pavlov free of charge. First, try clothes on. Second, borrow clothes. Third, use the studio. Fourth, decorate clothes. The arrangement of clothing on display can be changed freely. Fifth, participate in events like workshops and talks given by guests. Sixth, propose a project. It is possible to propose a not-for-profit project that utilizes a Pavlov space and equipment, such as a fashion show, theater, performance, workshop, and so on. Seventh, read the story tags on each clothes. Eighth, you can donate your clothes to this Pavlov. Ninth, you can even become a project member. The activities of project members include voluntary management of Pavlov and participation in regular meetings. In these meetings, project members consider interesting ways in which the clothes can be used. In addition, the various activities conceived by project members are realized during the exhibition. So like this, Pavlov, which is a new platform of clothes, can be more like practical community project than so-called art project. So you can install this project anywhere you like, such as school, office, apartment, cafe, park, and so on, if there is a community who wanted to do this project. Laundry of the senses was a public art realized by washing and drying laundry that anyone can do. The Kenyan people hand washing their clothes were making the town more vibrant, and the laundries hung outside were adding colors to the landscape, which led me to suggest this workshop. Compared to Kenya, all process of laundry is automatized, and the laundry tended to be hidden from the landscape in Japan. This work didn't intend to deny automatized washing and drying, but to make people hand washing laundry outside. To open up participants' creative senses, during the workshop, participants created music by hand washing their laundries, dried them in the town to decorate as if multinational flags, took lunch as if were hanami, which is cherry blossom viewing picnic party in Japan, of enjoying food along with the view with laundries, and then sketched the landscape, including the colorful laundries. I decided upon sketching as an activity which utilizes the time it takes for clothes to dry and also serves as an analog technique for recording the landscape. After such a session of opening up their creative senses, the participants would change into their newly washed clothes at the site and then went home. This workshop is now held regularly at Iwaki City in Fukushima, an area struck by the disaster on March 11, 2011. The area previously went through a time in which, due to effects of the earthquake and the nuclear plant incident, laundry was hung inside of houses, and no children could be seen playing at local parks because of the influence of radioactivity. So now it is said that no problem to live here normally and actually safe, while some of people still hang their laundries inside of the houses as a new custom. A curator who is working for the art center in Iwaki invited me to do this workshop regularly. So I think focusing and celebrating an everyday task, in this case washing clothes, is needed in these sorts of locations because this is really people living place. So if you cannot do this kind of a workshop here, we have to say this area is not for human being. Then uniform is a project that invited the end users into the design process of their uniform, challenging the idea of conventional homogenized style of uniform. In the Toride Art Project, art festival in Ibaraki Prefecture, staff members have developed a kind of tradition of wearing items in selected color of the year. I adapted this tradition into my project. I asked staff members to bring personal items having in color of the year. Then we combined them to create unique forms. In 4 years, I created orange jackets, blue hats, green bags, and pink skirts. I developed these activities into a new method of creating clothes, involving fashion brands created with elderly women and fashion brands created with children. Children who are generally encouraged to stimulate their creativity through play are typically not allowed by adults or society at large to fool around when it comes to clothes. For instance, it would be unthinkable to let kids cut their clothes up with a pair of scissors. So even though these are children I'm talking about, but they are already participants in the act of fashion and of wearing clothes. So I don't have enough time to go into detail today, but I am now interested in ideas of making clothes as objects by using the concept of fashionscape, such as the cooperative production of clothing with the people placed on fringes of the fashion industry, like children and elderly women, as well as clothes which reflect unique communication happening through the process of their production. So far mentioned by broadening the range of options as regards how people interact with clothes and textile, I think it will be possible to realize a different kind of communication and rich society. Fashion represents a medium that is the closest and most familiar to human beings. The clothes that one already wears, the act of rethinking those clothes and stopping to think about fashion itself are all connected to the creative acts of making our everyday lives richer and more fulfilling. I don't think the rights and privileges associated with those acts should be monopolized by so-called fashion brands. The joy involved in the creative acts is open to all people and all participants of wearing clothes. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nishio. Sylvie, very happy to start the second presentation. Thank you.
So my name is Nicole Barakat and I'm from Sydney in Australia. And I just wanted to start by saying thank you so much for inviting me to come today. It's an honour and a pleasure to be here and have this opportunity to share my practice, my art practice and my collaborative practice with communities. And it's also been very affirming to be here and to hear from like-minded people, because I often feel like I'm working in isolation as an artist, but also just being in Australia and being relatively far from the rest of the world. So it's nice to hear other people's words that resonate with me. So collaboration and community is what I've called this, and I'm looking at the ideas, a few different ideas, but I think for me the main one is, why do I do this? And I think I do this because I do this kind of work because it's about transforming the conditions of everyday life, my life, the lives of the participants I work with, and those that come across the work and encounter it. So I've been working as a lead artist and facilitator with communities for almost 15 years. And it was only after I graduated from art school that I actually gained my education in community arts and cultural development. It was through my direct experiences working with communities and informal mentorships with experienced arts and community workers that I developed a passion for a way of working that now sustains my art practice. The women who mentored me worked and still work with communities from a political and social justice perspective, primarily supporting women of colour, refugee and asylum seekers, migrant women, LGBTQIA+ communities, and folks outside the supposed centre of society. My experience in these circles taught me not to make a division between my work as an artist and my politics. Making art with people is a political act and inevitably creates change in ways that aren't always measurable. So I consciously approach my practice in community engagement and in education in a non-hierarchical way. I have a body of knowledge and experience, and so do the people I'm working with. I value this work as an exchange of our knowledge and skills and experience, a genuine collaboration. Therefore, one of the most important aspects of my project is building trust with participants and building a mutual respect for each other. Forming genuine connections and sometimes friendships with participants is just as vital as the work that we're producing. My connection with communities doesn't exist in a vacuum. The ability to build trust depends heavily on the existing relationships that the participants have with the organisation or the curator or producer. All of the collaborative community projects I've created so far have been initiated by arts organisations or institutions, and the projects that I feel work best are the ones that were initiated by individuals or organisations that have an existing relationship with these community participants. So I'm going to focus on 3 projects that I feel have achieved key goals for myself and also the participants and the broader community and audience. And the goals are to build trust and establish sustainable connections, to create meaningful experiences and to value the process over the product, and to transform the conditions of our everyday lives. The work I make with communities are essentially for the communities that I'm working in. If an outside audience also gains something from that, then that's great, but it's not the sole intention of the project. My solo practice and my collaborations with communities are heavily driven by my intuition. from techniques and approaches to the interpersonal relationships. There are very complex things that come into play. The way I work can also be very subtle and gentle at times, but I still know it makes an impact when participants relax into it and engage and respond and create and have fun. It was nice to hear that from Nishio as well. It's like people don't always consciously know why they're doing something, but they're enjoying it, and that's always a really important part of a project. One of the first projects that had a significant shift in the way I was engaging with communities was in 2010, 2011, Campbelltown Arts Centre in Western Sydney. Their curator at the time, Rosie Dennis, invited me to participate in a 4-week experimental arts lab called Site Lab, where about 10 artists took up residence in various public places in a small suburb in southwest Sydney called Minto. The premise of my proposal was the very simple starting point of making string from domestic cloth that was donated by the residents of Minto. Through the process of making with the local communities, we would then decide what the outcome would be. So this was the first time that I had a curator trust my process as an artist and allowed me to approach projects so openly. And I had faith that the poetics of string could be strong enough to hold itself and would form the perfect record of our gatherings and our conversations and the time spent making. So from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday to Friday, I could be found in the vacant local post office inside the slowly disintegrating Minto Mall. And within the empty shop front, I created a makeshift lounge where residents could gather and make string and chat and have a cup of tea. So after 4 weeks, I worked with young people at the local high school and many residents. Some had participated for a short time and others were dedicated to joining me every day. This meditative, slow process of string making inevitably created this new sense of time for people and this new routine. So it was an invitation for them to stop, to gather, to sit and to be in the moment of just making string. And also without an outcome. We didn't know what we were going to do with it at that point. It triggered for some people memories of one gentleman's mother back in Papua New Guinea making string daily from plant fibres, and also creating a space for first conversations to happen between old neighbours who'd never spoken because of the stigma in the neighbourhood of befriending anyone who lived on the other side of Pembroke Road. So my main collaborator was Laurie Porter, who was a prolific maker of extremely fine crochet using sewing thread. And for our project Common Threads, Laurie created hundreds of metres of beautiful, tightly spun string, which was the previous image. One of the participants, Vicky Andrews, affirmed there wouldn't be a home in Minto without crochet, and it was then that I immediately knew that what we had to do with this hand-spun string. So as crochet wasn't one of my existing skills at the time, I took a crash course from my sister, and I very quickly appreciated the free-form sculptural potential of the technique. We made a series of large crochet doilies that were essentially drawings with our string. And our hand-spun cloth string now embodied the moments shared through the making process and was also heavily embedded with the stories that it had absorbed prior to coming to us. I invited donations of domestic cloth from local residents for a reason. At the time, Minto was a community that was facing much change, with new private housing developments being built over demolished social housing. The breaking up of the existing community and relocation of many residents had caused a lot of pain for the community and also conflict with new residents moving into private housing. And as Rosie Dennis, the curator, noted, she said Minto had something like 80% social housing. It gets such a bad rap. All the lead stories are about shootings or drugs or things getting set on fire. But there's more to this suburb. I wanted to show a different side of it. Working with a very intimate material and familiar process and bringing the usually private domestic act of making into a public space, I wondered if we could create a space where residents could connect with their old and new neighbours and also have an opportunity just to reflect on what was happening in their community, this transformation. My practice is very much rooted in the language of materials, and materials offer an invitation to our senses, an opportunity to engage physically and emotionally, and conjuring responses that reach far beyond the intellectual. I like to play with materials that are loaded and have the potential for their meaning to be dismantled. These material languages enable me to find new ways of speaking and understanding. Material languages also have the capacity to embody an idea, an emotion, and present us with an opportunity to communicate that can only be spoken with the absence of words. A different language is a different reality. Domestic reused pieces of cloth are materials that also come with stories, materials that arrive with a history, that bear witness and listen, that have absorbed time and heard other stories. These materials are significant because they are already connected to us. By simply being present with us in everything we do, they retain a part of our physical selves, our skin that we've shed, our hair, body fluids, leaving stains and marks visible and invisible. The familiarity of cloth and our extremely intimate relationship with it provides a warm starting ground for community projects. I also consider my art as my home. When I make my work or facilitate a collaborative project, I'm inviting audiences and participants into my home. In my own cultural and familial traditions, I must give my visitors a comfortable place to sit, a warm drink, and of course an abundance of food, both metaphorically and literally. Acts of generosity with community arts projects, I find, are the key to a deeper engagement and building genuine connections amongst people. As a side note, a few years after Minto Live, I went on to work with Rosie Dennis again at Urban Theatre Projects on a program called Practice and Participate, which I took up residence for 3 weeks in the backyard of a local residence home in the Sydney suburb of Bankstown. And as the new artistic director of UTP, Rosie connected 8 artists with local residents as a way of just getting to know the neighbourhood. And she continued those relationships. And in fact, that was 4 years ago, and I just recently saw one of the residents at the launch of their 2018 program. So she's done various things to continue that relationship. So in 2005, I was invited to lead a project with a group of artists from Weave Parramatta for the Museum of Applied Arts and Sciences, the Sydney Design Festival. And Weave Parramatta is an informal group that meets monthly and prides itself on providing a supportive environment for connection, storytelling, remembering and honouring cultural traditions. Weave is also situated within the Parramatta Artist Studios, which is a local government-supported non-residential artist studio complex that runs a really strong public program that shares contemporary art with communities. The brief for this project was very specific and time was extremely limited. We were given about 6 weeks' notice for the project and only 4 weeks making time. And we had to also fit under this umbrella of Sydney Design Week, which was refashioning solutions. It was about considering the way designers and producers harness new methodologies and challenge conventional notions of design practice, and also extend the relationship between imagination, experimentation, and product. I was very familiar with Weave, as this was my 3rd big project with them, all public projects, and that was on top of a number of workshops I'd attended and also run for them. In our first gathering, one of the participants, Ling Halbert, who's shown here, led us in a Buddhist tea meditation, guiding us through the rituals of tea meditation, sharing moments of mindfulness through tea drinking. Ling, who is a Lao woman, had set the tone for the whole project with her generous offering, and she guided us to find a relevant starting point that still related to design in some way. So over a series of gatherings, a large 2-metre diameter installation evolved. We titled the work Teachology, as it visually reimagined the ritual of tea drinking and paid homage to the complexities of a common practice so often taken for granted. Each crocheted object represented one part of a whole system, highlighting the intricate ecology present in a simple cup of tea. During the tea meditation, Ling asked us to remember and give thanks to the person who made the cup that we drank from, the farmers who grew the tea, the worms in the soil that help nourish its growth, and the pets of the farmers who are also part of the farming family. Ling's acknowledgement of the intricacy of a seemingly simple cup of tea firmly planted this seed for our project to come together. The installation represented the complexity of tea and the diversity of our individual and collective engagement with tea drinking, which is the 2nd most common drink in the world after water. Our installation included specific cultural tea traditions, such as Helene and Hafer's Persian tea urn, Farzana's Afghan shopping bag to buy the tea, alongside Ling's raindrops and Dami's electric kettle and Tulip's perfectly formed teacups, Mere's teaspoons and sugar bowl and Tashin's plump teapots, as well as Gale's pods and flowers from the Camellia sinensis plant whose leaves are used to make the tea, and Claudia's baskets that growers use to harvest the tea leaves. As many who crochet do, we left behind the patterns and the rules of crochet in favour of its freedom. And when I teach young people to crochet, I often just slip in that it's the original 3D printing. So it's always nice to connect it to technology. And what I love most about crochet is, of course, its sculptural freedom. So we approached the project as a series of crocheted drawings, which was a very liberating framework for the women who, many of them were experienced crocheters. I was really moved by the openness and the willingness of the weave artists and their level of imagination and skill in realising this project in such a short time. The artists who came together to make Teachology respected and acknowledged the traditional craft, but also uncovered new possibilities through non-traditional materials, methods and approaches. The material we used is an industrial nylon bricklayers line, and the fluorescent pink was chosen for a number of reasons, including the assurance that this collection of relatively small objects was going to be seen in quite a big space, which was the turbine hall of the museum. I'm just going to talk very quickly about the installation. So our installation was there in the far right top corner. And then the museum also wanted a participatory aspect for the general public. And I also created this large crochet doily out of industrial rope, which I was crocheting during our gathering. So for me, that was a bit of a metaphor again for the conversations and just the act of making and being together. And then this is Helene. So the weave artists for this project is the first and only community project where the artists were paid. The community participants were actually paid to be part of it, which I think is a great model. And Helene here was teaching visitors to the museum how to crochet just a chain stitch. And then we created this collaborative drawing, which I drew a stylized version of a crocheted collar that was in the Powerhouse Museum's collection. And there's a great story about that, which I can tell a bit later because I feel like I'm running out of time. In this same year, I was invited by Beck Dean, a curator at Performance Space in Sydney, to work on my first community collaborative project with artist-led organisation, the CAD Factory. Now, the CAD Factory is in the rural community of Narrandera, about 540 kilometres southwest of Sydney. As it was my first time working in a rural community, I was conscious of my privileges as an artist operating in a major city centre, and I also had very little knowledge or connection to the women I was about to work with, but I knew we had one thing in common, which was textiles. I knew of other artists who'd worked with Vic and Sarah McEwen from the CAD Factory and understood that after moving there from Sydney 5 years earlier, they had created a series of projects with the community and had quickly earned the respect and trust of the folks in this small town. The CAD Factory creates immersive and experimental work guided by authentic exchange, ethical principles, people and place. At the end of this project, I realised the vital role that the arts and the CAD Factory play in Narrandera. On 2 different occasions, women who were involved with the project informed me that they always planned to leave Narrandera when their children became teenagers, but that the CAD Factory changed that for them as there was something genuinely worth staying for. The brief for this project was very open with 2 main starting points: a large community of women who work with textiles and the desire to make a collaborative work for a 3-day arts festival called On Common Ground. The festival was to be held in Narrandera Common, which is a bush reserve and koala regeneration park alongside the Murrumbidgee River. And yes, we saw lots of koalas while we were working, which was nice. The festival addressed the impacts of colonisation, the development of agriculture, species extinction and reduction, continuing environmental changes and resource management initiatives associated with the river. For our first gathering, participants were invited to bring a textile piece they'd made to share with the group. This gathering would be an opportunity for me to find out what they were interested in and what existing skills there already were in the community and what they'd like to know more about, and also for them to get to know me and my practice. We gathered over 2 days and 40 women participated, which was amazing. In a town of only 3,871 people, I was absolutely thrilled because we don't even get that many people in Sydney when we have an initial call out. These women had a diversity of knowledge and experience in textiles and the arts, and their desire to gain new skills and a common interest in working with materials from the land led us to work with eco-dyeing. Over 3 more visits, we set up eco-dyeing camps on the banks of the Murrumbidgee, as well as the platform of the seldom used train station. Using water from the river, native and introduced plants from the common, as well as plants from the women's homes, we dyed about 20 old woolen blankets and scraps of silk sourced from second-hand stores in the region. We managed to stay in the moment with the project and agreed that we wouldn't consider the outcome until closer to the festival. So over the week leading up to the festival, we constructed a total of 26 large textile works with the cloth that we dyed. This process was largely directed by the women, and my job was really just to work out the logistics of the installation as a whole. It turned out that 26 people had also worked on the project, so after the festival we divided the works amongst all who participated, including our installation team. So everyone managed to keep a piece of this collaborative work. Each piece of cloth became a record for this place and its community. The dyed and resisted marks of the cloth bore witness to our gatherings, offering a memory of the conversations and laughter and ideas that were exchanged. The work was created by many hands and hearts and across a number of generations, from 4 years old to 86 years old. The work, titled "I Think I Still Hear the Sky Vibrating," acts as a reminder of the importance of collaboration, coming together as artists, makers, and a community. The title came from just a piece that I wrote after our first gathering because it was such a beautifully energised space and a very genuine space, and just being out on site by the river, all of that just inspired me to write a piece, and then the title came from that piece that I wrote. So I returned to Narrandera a year later to work on a second project with the CAD factory called Shadow Places, again for Sydney Design Festival. And I've continued to deepen my relationship with many of the women. On a recent visit to a friend in nearby Wagga Wagga, I made the extra 100-kilometre drive to Narrandera. As I was approaching the town, I felt a sense that I was returning home. The familiarity of the wide open landscape, witnessing a storm forming in the distance, and the bright yellow of the canola crops. I realised what this town and these people meant to me in that moment. I was coming back out of choice. I was coming to visit my friends, to see an exhibition that they had created, and to share a meal with them. And in that moment, I realised this is actually what a genuine, trusting, sustainable connection feels like. And this is a meaningful experience that definitely transformed the conditions of our everyday lives. Now, I'm just going to talk to a couple of other slides here. We recently rehung the work Shadow Places. Originally, it was in the museum, as you saw, and then in October, it was rehung in an open space in Narrandera in the community. So it was the first time it was returned to the community. I also, before coming here, I asked the community to give me some responses of what has been important for them and what they remember about the projects we've worked on together. And these are some of their responses, which I'll read. So Lindy Russell said, "I got so much out of being involved in these projects, being in a creative space, experimenting and learning from others, which gave me the opportunity to try many things, learn, and to bring my creativity and experiences to the two groups to complement each other." Julie Briggs said, "I learned that everyone has something to contribute. I learned how bringing to light apparently mundane life experience and memory can feed engaging works that tell a bigger story, and it was fun." And Joyce Spencer, who turned 86 when we were working on this project, said, and she's actually an artist in her own right and has quite a big body of work of her own, said it was an exciting experience for women who live in the country, isolated from city exhibitions, to be able to see the finished project in the Powerhouse Museum in Sydney and later on here in Narrandera. And Josie Middleton, who just emailed me the day I arrived in Hong Kong, and I had to include it because Josie, in my first meeting with her, was very hesitant And when I asked what she did and what she was interested in, she just said everything. And she was very vague, and I could see she was really hesitant to connect with me. But by the end, Josie and I became really good friends, and she had a very dry sense of humour and was just lots of fun to be around. So Josie said there were a good number of us working together, some more than others, but we are a happy bunch of people who enjoy doing things together and who are prepared to spread our wings and accept the challenge to do different and new things. I thank you and all the gang with whom I worked with. It was a wonderful experience and one which I truly enjoyed. Thank you. My sister in Canberra says how fortunate we are to have people like the CAD Factory and their contacts here in Narendra. I agree. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicole. Please have a seat. Sylvie, may I invite you to start the third presentation?
So, first, I really want to thank you, the Middle Six and chat team, for inviting me to this very interesting and I think inspiring discussion on this weekend. And yeah, really thank you so much. So, first, I would like to start my presentation with some images of the artwork of Franz Erhard Walter. He's a German artist who has inspired my work very much and had been working with wearable participatory fabric sculpture since the 1960s. He has been discovered more and more by the public during the last years. And I'm very pleased that he has won the Golden Lion for the Best Artist in the central show of this year's Venice Biennale of Architecture. So I would like to show you just 3 pieces of his work. It's called the first work set, and he did it in the 1960s. The first piece is called Cross Connecting Form, and it's made of 2 crosses of canvas with oval openings on all 4 ends of each cross. And there are 2 crosses. The one they have over their heads, and the other one lying on the ground there on the grass. Each of the 4 users is asked to hang one end of the cross around his neck. So they are determined by the piece, and after a while the large cross can be exchanged for the small one. So persons stay together much more closer. The second piece is called Channel of Sight. 2 persons hang the ends of the fabric box with the open ends downwards over their heads, and they cannot see each other as long as the length of the fabric between them is sagging. By moving backwards and finally by leaning backwards with their full weight, the fabric is tensioned and both are able to see each other. And the third work is called Short Before Twilight. It's made of 2 long stripes of canvas, and they are divided into 9 sections by vertical double seams. So the 9 persons slip into the 9 openings and pull it to the piece up to the hip height. Then they walk behind one another in a temporary community. Franz Erhard Walter uses these textile sculptures as instruments to activate fundamental experiences like the connection of the single person to space and time, and also to volume and proportions. There's an interaction between body and object, and also between action and imagination. And I think this method of creating communities and spatial relationships between different persons just with panels of fabrics is so pretty simple, but very impressive. And it's very inspiring for my work, and I think it fits very well to the topic of the discussion on of this weekend. So in 2009, I wrote a book about textile architecture, and I have it with me if someone will have a look later maybe. In this book, I always compare the contemporary application with historical use, to show the inspiration it could give for the future. Sometimes forgotten, they are worth to be activated and to solve current demands in architecture. And in my lecture, I also will relate my work with the historical examples because they are really a great inspiration for me. So I work with textiles in architecture. And there I always influence aspects like light, sight, acoustics, and also climate. The first spatial construction I will explain is the partition, which has been used in different ways through history. For example, Persian rulers completely segregated themselves from the public using curtains. When the court gathered, the king was hidden behind the curtain, and by having it open theatrically, the king showed himself at public audiences. The curtain was an instrument here of representation, which Persian rulers used for the interaction between withdrawal and appearance. And here you see a scene at the Southampton station on the occasion of a visit by Queen Ude to England in 1856. And it really demonstrates very good just how long this Oriental veiling tradition remained alive. Uniques formed a cordon with shawls and carpets along the paths from the carriages to the railway compartment to protect the Queen and her female court against the curious gazes of the faceless English. And a very progressive use of the partition was made in the large living and working space of the Tugendhat house, built by Mies van der Rohe. The individual areas could be separated by curtains as required without disturbing the unity of the whole place. And Grete Tugendhat, the owner of the house, spoke of a basic spatial and living feeling of isolation, being alone, but always feeling a sense of belonging to a larger whole. So in Europe at the early 20th century, the use of the partition was completely different from the Oriental veiling tradition. Now it was used to solve spatial demands in flexible living situations. Here's another picture of it. And here's the ground floor, and the red lines are the positions of the partitions. So here you see a meeting room of an administration building in Munich in Germany. There the curtains are used as flexible partitions, as well as they improve the acoustics and function as sound absorption. Here you see almost the empty room. And the architects asked me to develop a special system of curtains to divide the big room into smaller spaces and to adapt the size of the room to the different functions. So offering, for example, space for lectures, smaller meetings, or bigger conferences. Using the flexible curtain, there's an interaction between opening and closing, and also between communication and withdrawal. The advantage of the textile partitions is that they can be used temporarily, they are individually modifiable, and if they are not used, they can be pushed together and be parked. And the different parts of the curtain consists of a double-hanged, heavy and sound-absorbing textile quality in different blue and gray tones. And in addition to the acoustic improvement, the curtains change the spatial perception. The soft textured and voluminous fabric conveys special warmth. The big space, appearing rather cool, can be divided into smaller, more personal areas by using the soft material. The second vertical defining structure I will introduce is the room-in-room construction. The curtain, which surrounded a bed on all sides, was already popular during the ancient world, and the veiling practice had been a part of wedding rituals since time immemorial. In that sense, the groom used to enter the tent of the bride. In the Middle Ages, the closed curtains kept dust and insects out and protect against cold and drafts. Since there was no separate bedroom and the bed usually stood in the heated living room in which several people slept, the closed curtains created a certain private sphere. And here you see the design of the Velvet and Silk Café during the exhibition Women's Fashion in Berlin, in Germany, in 1927, which Lilly Reich and again Mies van der Rohe created. The curtains were used to divide the big room of the cafe, so a group of small spaces were formed which flowed into one another, but they were partially defined by draperies of velvet and silk in different colors. By moving the curtain, temporary spaces were created which could be changed if needed. So I also used the curtain as a space-defining element to create the design of the exhibition Textile Architecture in the States and Textile and Industry Museum in Augsburg in Germany. So based on the book, I curated the exhibition and also did the exhibition design. So before the visitor entered the exhibition, he walked through a corridor limited by white curtains, with the left curtain blowing in the wind and text were projected onto it. So here you see the corridor. And here first the empty exhibition space. So according to the topic, the whole exhibition architecture was designed by textile elements. A huge curtain, you see the gray one here, winded through the exhibition space like a textile ribbon and formed rooms where the contents were conveyed by means of text, images, mock-ups, material samples, and films. So furthermore, the curtain also functioned as an information medium and guidance system, so all images and text were printed on fabric. So here you see on the right, it's a digital printing on textile, and on thicker materials we printed with another printing method. So the 5 design principles of textile architecture, here the curtain, the textile roof, the yellow here, the umbrellas, the tent, and also the pneumatic bubble were implemented spatially. So, for example, a visitor stood underneath a textile roof or stepped into a yurt or were inside a pneumatic bubble. So that way, visitors were able to emotionally experience the different spatial situations. So the third project I show uses an exterior curtain. So we all know the curtain being inside to protect against light and heating, but the exterior curtain hangs in front of the building facade like a second skin. So during the antiquity, on the occasion of festive processions, monuments, public squares, and streets were temporarily decorated with fabrics. And this common textile covering had been used for centuries. So here you see the St. Lawrence Basilica in Florence. And in the honor of Henry V's funeral in 1610, the whole church was temporarily enshrouded using magnificent draperies. But the outdoor curtain was not only used in a decorative way, richly ornamented carpets or curtains hanging in the atria and the arcades of the palaces served as a representative and also flexible space-defining elements, as you can see here between the columns of the Theodoric Palace in Ravenna in Italy. And this practice has been used in the southern countries till today. Curtains temporarily shade arcades and form a cool, intimate space in the middle of the public space. And I think that's a very beautiful example here, the curtain between the arcades on the St. Mark Square in Venice in Italy. So for a Montessori school in Germany, I was asked to design outdoor curtains serving as sun protection and also controlling sight. The architects planned a quadratic floor plan where 14 classrooms are oriented towards an inner court. You see 7 there on the top and 7 on the bottom. And the pupils and teachers sitting in the classrooms are very able to get into contact very easily. They are able to get very easily into contact with persons being in the courtyard or in the opposite classrooms. So it's a very open concept, but there are also times where a class has to concentrate and withdraw from the community. So curtains I designed are a very simple way to fulfill the changing needs of openness and closeness. And moving the curtains on curved tracks, semi-transparent interspaces are formed. The textile I used is a very simple net, originally used in the field of sports. And there's a very fascinating and useful effect that if you look from the outside to the inside, the curtain is almost opaque. And if you look from the inside to the outside, the curtain is is semi-transparent. So the pupils have a certain visual boundary, but they still belong to the community. And if the sun is shining, the curtains protect against the sun light and stop the heating of the classrooms. So at the end, I would like to show a project of mine which have the focus on temporary textile interventions in public space. Thereby, I chose different places and institutions of my hometown, Munich, and played fictively on them with textile installations. So they are not finished designs, but first thoughts about changing public space with textiles for a short time and questioning their functions. Currently, I'm in a discussion with various institutions to develop the first ideas into real projects. There you see the Max-Joseph Square in Munich, and it's a very vivid square surrounded by the Bavarian State Opera and some other important buildings, where many people pass and cars drive around. And in the middle, there's a sculpture, and on the stone floor, there's a pattern that reminded me of the construction of the velum. The velum was a retractable textile roof construction that during the Roman antiquity protected the audience sitting in the amphitheaters against the sun. So I just reproduced the drawing, lifted it, and designed a textile roof defining a certain space on the square and making it visible. So very easily protected space is formed, which people can use for a certain period of time, but they are not completely separated from the environment. People passing by, they can join very easily in an event or something like this. So here you see from underneath. So at this square, the Bavarian State Opera is located, where operas and theater plays are performed. And I think erecting a canopy in front of the building could be a very interesting way to change the spatial perception. So the canopy acts as a red carpet, so it marks the way the visitor walks into the theater. And walking underneath the canopy, he feels protected and selected at the same time. So another way to change the facade is using a curtain, figuratively taking the stage curtain out of the inside of the opera and covering the entrance area. The building shape completely changes. So the building made of stones gets a soft and poetic cover. So the curtain is a complete new element which makes the building special, and it draws people's attention to the inside. So and there's another building in Munich. It's a Neue Pinakothek. It's an art museum, and there also the curtain completely changes the facade. So the textile cover maybe appears mysterious, and so people passing by become curious. But the curtain can also create a temporary architectural frame for events. For instance, the curtain on the Theresienwiese, the square in Munich where the Oktoberfest takes place once a year, activates the empty and dead space and makes it visible for a certain period of time. So, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Sylvie. Please take your seat and join the crosstalk. Nishio and Nicole, please join the crosstalk. So this section of crosstalk will be moderated by Mizuki Takahashi from chat.
So thank you so much for such a colorful presentations, and every projects are so beautiful, and also from different angles. And Nishio-san has an interest in the fashion, and Nicole has an interest in building the intimate relationship and the trust through the textile practice. And Sylvie is interested in the spatial transformations using the fabric, right? So, how shall I moderate? Yeah, but okay, I'm going to try the best. So, okay, let me start about Nishio-san's the presentation. So your motivations, part of your the motivations coming from your critical view on the current marketing-driven fashion industry, which homogenize and people's characters, right, and an identity. So, and yes, and okay, that's totally understand. I'm just curious why you are wearing the Royal Mail jackets today. So how is this, that jacket is shaping your identity? So could you tell me a little bit about what you are wearing today? Yeah.
Okay, thank you for giving me an easy question to answer. So yeah, this jacket is for okay, yes. This jacket is for British postman. So yeah, now you can understand me that I really like to switch my identity, to exchange roles. So of course I'm not a postman, but but I wear this as just fashion. So actually, some of you asked me why do you wear it and where did you buy it? So yeah, this has been a good communication tool. Then can I continue to explain?
Should we have some music?
Where did you get it? Where did you?
Yeah. I just bought it at second-hand store in Japan.
In Japan?
Yes.
Wow. That's interesting. It's
Then,
very heavy.
Yeah. Then this shirts has a lot of heart-shaped patterns like this, then which I really like. Then for me, this has also a very special memory and story, which I can't tell you because it's too romantic story. So, but I can say I'm wearing the important my own story behind this clothes.
So the important opportunity you're wearing this hat, the shirts.
Yes.
Okay.
Then next, this pants is usually for doing sports, But
Jersey, yeah, sports, yeah, pants.
So,
yeah. Sports
then this is not for official occasion like today, but I'm wearing this as a fashion. So I can say I'm mixing several identity of clothes or several meaning of clothes. Then I wanted to avoid to identify easily who I am or what I am. So because in my opinion, clothes as just clothes as just objects can be sometimes barrier or divide people. For example, the idea of like women wear skirts because they are just a woman. This kind of fixed idea,
Genderized
fixed
idea.
idea
of
doesn't create anything.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. It's so mysterious outlook. I don't go to the underwear. Okay, and maybe also the other questions, maybe that you and Nicole can share. And but you both of your practice, I can find something common. So then, you both of you seems to back to the traditional form of the common practice. So. Yeah, but now it's the 21st century, so we can, the text and we can send the message and the email, but that is kind of basic platform at this moment. So why, so you try to back to that's classical form like library, it's like gathering and making the crochets, and why those practices are so important?
I think those practices really are never going to go anywhere. They're always going to be here. And I think our need to gather as humans is just, it really does rise above everything else. And I think that a capitalist society that we live in has tried so hard to divide us and individualize us and, strip us of our skills and our knowledge. But I think as human beings, it's inevitable that we will resist that. And I think it was actually writing this paper was the first time I had to consciously really think about my practice and why I'm doing it, and because it's just part of my life. And I love that it's just part of my life. And when I'm working with people, it feels really natural and really comfortable. And at times it's not comfortable, and we push people and they push me and we step out. And I showed you 3 projects that were really enjoyable and great, but I've worked on some terrible projects, not because of the participants, but because of the organisation. But I'm diverting. But coming back to it, I think it's a natural thing that people want to be together and also create. And I think that we all have this desire, in whatever way it comes out, to create and produce things for our lives and things that make us happy with materials that make us feel good.
Yeah, yesterday we talked about the community, right? And as the communities and who's gonna include it and who's gonna be excluded. And I hardly seen any male collaborators in your slides. So could you little bit why
I talked a lot about women, and mostly I get invited to do projects where they specifically say it's a project for women. Look, it's no lie that the textiles and working with fibre is, very much pushed as a feminine craft, and I can't ignore that. But I think too, in the communities I'm working with, it just happens to be women that are interested in that. And I don't think it's ever been at the exclusion of men, although sometimes in some communities, if there was a male present, it would change the dynamic completely. So we haven't specifically said no men can be there, but for cultural reasons, sometimes no men can be in the room with some women I've worked with. But yeah, I think it's just the way it's happened. Although there have been, in the dyeing workshop, there were a few people, like partners who came along and, tried out, but they weren't really part of the core group. We're just more committed. What can I say? No, I'm kidding.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you? So your projects in the kind of the from kids to elderly, and they are kind of having the different skill to engage in the projects like the Buddha making. Yeah.
So, personally, I really like the past style of communication. So, if possible, I would live in the past, and it is simply because I have never experienced such a life. We have internet and we can connect easily. But when we install the past style into contemporary life, I think the meaning of the behavior and the landscape really change. I guess it was hard work and no choice in the past. But if you do same thing today, yeah, it means people find the joy in the process. So because contemporary life is too organized and too busy, so I think different ways of using the time is required. I think like internet society has realized very quick and wide communication. I really like it, but at the same time, I think we need small and slow communication as well as a human beings.
Okay, but on the other hand, so, we cannot avoid now is a post-internet society we are living in, and we received a lot of benefit out of it. And I'm thinking about the artistic practice. Do you think it's your attachment to the material sometimes, it's difficult to be recognized, in contemporary art context?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I feel like I'm always going to be placed in a box in terms of what I do, and I like calling the textiles I do drawing because it makes it much broader and much more open. But I also have accepted, I think, that I'm not trying to be something other than I am, and I'm not trying for my practice to be something other than it is, and I don't let the dominant art world define who I am as an artist and what I do and what I bring to communities. So I think, at the core of it, it does really, it's very obvious sometimes that text, because of what I'm working with and who I'm working with and how I'm working, I get excluded from lots of things. That's why it's such an honor to be here, because I was included here and I feel very included here, and that's really important. So thank you.
Yeah, and in the case of Sylvie, and you exemplify the Franz Edward Walter, and also some of the pieces reminded me the crystal. It's a full cover, the Parliament building, and to draw the people's awareness on the historical context. But the functions and publics sometimes work to cover, and also the change the historical context in the site. So your last projects, it's not realized yet, but it's also the historical site, right? How much you concerned about that aspect?
Yeah, I think one of the most the biggest advantages of textiles that they can be used temporarily. So you can change a historic building just for a certain time, and you can play with it. So I think the textile, it's so easy to change something with it, and I always look to the history like they did it, and there are so many, great inspirations, and they did so many different ways of covering, of protect against sun and things like that. So I really it's very a big knowledge I want to bring to the future or to now. So using different materials or different ways to do it with it, but I think I can learn from the knowledge, from the historic knowledge.
Yeah. So in that case, how do you choose the color and the material to your architectural and architectural work?
Yeah, for the last project, I didn't choose anything because it's just just swords. There's no fabric is selected for it. But the projects you saw before, for example, the one in the conference room, there it was all the function they made me choose a thick material, a voluminous material. There are 2 layers of it. I think the spatial demands, they make me choose a special material, or the colors there were related to the colors the company has. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And yesterday we also discussed about our practice, how our practices give the impact on the natural environment. So the architecture, the textile architecture use a huge amount of fabric, as we saw from your presentations and from oral. So how much are you concerned about this kind of, the eco-friendly material or recyclable materials? What's going to happen after that's temporary, the textile?
Yeah. I think in a lot of ways, textiles are more eco-friendly than other materials because they are very light. So the construction hasn't to be so strong like for other materials, and it's thinner. So there's a very big advantage for textiles. And this morning I really was interested in the project. I didn't know, I forgot the name from the institution, the man. He told us, because I think in clothing industry, they are much more further than in the industry making textiles for upholstery or curtains. So I think there's much more work to improve the fabrics. So there are some eco-friendly materials at the moment, but not really a lot.
Okay, there's just still a lot of room to improve.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we have only 1 minute, so should be open the question to the audience. If there's any question to ask? No? Okay, so then we can then we can close the session. Do you have something to add? Do you have anything to add?
I just jokingly said, don't we all get to show off and explain our outfits? Or just Nishio?
Yeah, you can explain. You can. Yeah, please say. Yeah, you are wearing the very nice.
She did everything on her own.
Yeah.
But
stand up.
everything.
Tell us. Yeah.
I was joking.
It's okay. Okay. So thank you so much.